I don't know exactly what it is about collecting physical video games that tickles all my fancies, whether it's the really amazing storytelling on the box art, or the fact you own this game as a hard copy, and if all digital storefronts go the way the Dodo did, your copy of the game still exists. And the wonderful secrets and details all over the box art make it so that I have to spend all my money on these cases. And let's not forget about the bonuses that come with some of these games, like posters and stickers, or those over-the-top collector's editions with statues and whatnot. But even though all these physical games are a part of my wonderful physical video game collection, there are some that are just completely useless. Physical games might not always be the most convenient gaming habit because you actually have to get up and physically swap your games, but without a doubt there's just something cool about owning the case it comes in and proving you just spent real money on a franchise you openly like. It's the same reason I keep all the boxes for all the consoles I buy. Other people call it hoarding, but I call it collecting. But why does this physical copy exist? I don't mean the game itself, I mean the code in box. Code in box physical games have their pros and cons. I love that these versions of these games have all the conveniences of digital games, like the fact I don't have to get up and swap the cartridge, or I don't need to carry the game around if I'm traveling, or the fact that my dog can't eat the cartridge if I lose my game, and just the idea that the case can be added to my shelf and displayed along with the rest of my collection. I don't normally care about having the cartridge in the case or not, as long as there's an official case from the developers. But there are some obvious downsides to this as well. As soon as you download these codes, that's it. There's no resale value. You can't trade, nothing. It's locked to your account and it has to stay that way. Or what if for some reason you get hacked or lose all access to your account and can't recover it? Too bad. It's all gone. Goodbye. And there's always the risk that if your account gets banned for some reason, you risk losing it all as well. One of my favorite things about collecting physical games is the fact that I can share with my friends and my brothers. There have been countless times when my brother has recommended a game to me and just handed me the physical copy when he's done, just so I can experience it. With digital codes, this isn't possible. This is primarily on Switch versions of big games like Borderlands, Lego 2K Drive, BioShock. These are all 2K games. This is an ongoing trend for 2K for some reason. Almost all their games are digital codes, except for a handful. This is most likely because it's expensive to print cartridges, which is most likely why most of these in-box codes seem to be for the Nintendo Switch. Manufacturing cartridges are probably a lot more expensive than cranking out some discs. Video game publishers do this to save money and to get onto store shelves. It saves publishers money because having larger capacity cartridges with more space is also more pricey, which is also why you might see download required on the box. Just the act of getting a game on a store shelf can definitely boost sales of a title. Parents might see a game and buy it for their kids, or maybe people who didn't know the game existed digitally and are seeing the box in store, which sparks an interest and gets them to try it out. Physical games aren't just for collectors, there's a whole marketing side to it for the publishers. This is why even a game that seems like it should only be available on digital stores gets a physical release. I always see the Spike game and Borderlands collection on sale for an incredibly cheap price, and they're almost always the cheapest new game on the shelf, which once again is good for sales if someone wants to buy a new game for less than $20. But there's an expiry date on these codes, so even though you bought it physically, there may come a time when you can't even access your purchase. Another huge downside is that I have to give up a limb's worth of storage on my device for these big game downloads. Seriously, there's a handful of these games that are over the original and late model's entire storage capacity, over 32 gigabytes for one game. And that's why some of these games have this micro SD card required stamp on the box. That's another money-saving tactic we see from publishers. There are some games that require updates to play, with only some of the game on the cartridge. These games do have cartridges, but it's not all on there. Well then why don't you just give me the whole game on a code, because I don't have to download a bunch of data and still carry around the cartridge. It's like the worst of two worlds. This can be such a pain, especially if you archive any data to save space and then come back to the game eventually, or if you don't have a solid internet connection. It could take hours for a game to download. And while most games these days do come with a day one patch, most of the time it's not necessary to install those patches to at least play through the game. So it's not as bad as having to download the game itself, though Cyberpunk on PS4 still haunts me to this day. The Spyro Reignited trilogy is a perfect example of this kind of nonsense. You can play this game physically without updating it out of the box, but at a certain point in the first game it'll say an update is required. This is to finish downloading the rest of the game as well as the second and third games to the system. This was most likely to save storage on the Nintendo Switch cartridge, right? Well, yes, probably, but they also did this with the other console versions, which usually isn't done since those discs have larger storage capacities and are cheaper to manufacture. So this was clearly something Activision did to make you download most of the game regardless of what platform you play it on. But again, if the service for any of these platforms shut down, then what? Would you still be able to download parts of these games, or would it just not be in existence at all? We'll have to find out. Just play PC, I don't know. A similar thing happened with Assassin's Creed Ezio Collection on Switch. It has 3 games on the box art, but only Assassin's Creed 2 is on the cartridge. From the menu, you can download Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations from the eShop, which requires 35 gigabytes of storage. I get these are big games, and yeah, it makes sense to do this from a production and business standpoint, but it sucks for the player. 2/3 of the collection are missing, and these are massive files. And again, you still have to put the cartridge in the Switch to play them. This at least makes the physical cartridge hold its value. I was surprised we didn't see the 3 games split up on the home menu as we did with some other value pack games like FNAF, where you put in the cartridge and 5 games would show up, or Pikmin 1+2, where the 2 games would show up separately. Another example of useless physical games is Bayonetta! You might be curious why. Bayonetta 2 was released physically in February 2018, with the full game being on the Switch cartridge, and with a code and box so you could download Bayonetta 1 digitally. Okay, so when you bought Bayonetta 2 physically, you got both games. But then in 2022, they released a physical edition of Bayonetta 1. So if you wanted to own a physical copy of both Bayonetta 1 and 2, you've officially bought the first game twice. Why not just stick with the digital copy and save half of your money? Does it sound confusing? Good, because it is. Now what makes this even more confusing is the fact that Bayonetta 1 and 2 did have separate physical releases in Japan. For the time, this forced gamers around the world who wanted both copies physically for their collection to import them. Why didn't they just do the same over here? Or for the North American release of Bayonetta 1 on Switch, why didn't they just release a new version of Bayonetta 2 for a cheaper price just without the digital copy of Bayonetta 1? That way I'm not buying the same game twice. You know what else is kind of a useless physical release? Separate PS4 and PS5 editions. Now hear me out. Back when the PS5 first launched and we were transitioning to the current generation, there was a lot of games released for both consoles. So why did they continue to release these individually when the PS4 version could be upgraded for free to the PS5 version? Why print 2 separate copies for the game? Why not just release the PS4 version, or a copy that works on both? Because you know who did do that? Xbox. They merged the Xbox logos to say Xbox One and Xbox Series on the top of the banner of physical games to show the disc could be played on both generations of consoles. But for some reason, PlayStation is being stubborn and demands more discs and cases to be printed. I guess this makes sense for collectors who want to complete their collection on both systems, but for the average gamer, this doesn't really make sense. Now sometimes there aren't PS5 free upgrades, so that's a different story. But then you also get these boys, the pinnacle of physical releases, DLC cases. We primarily see this with free-to-play games like Fortnite. Why do I have so many of these? Every physical Fortnite box has a DLC code, unless it's the original Fortnite before the game turned into a battle royale. I first noticed this with the first physical DLC release of Fortnite, the Deep Freeze bundle, which for some reason has a disc inside, but only with the Xbox version. The PlayStation and Switch versions didn't get any sort of physical media. I don't know why the Xbox version only got this disc. It literally makes no sense. Maybe they just had leftovers from the original Save the World. After putting the disc in my Xbox, it just installs the old version of Fortnite Battle Royale from 2018, so that's pretty useless. One thing that may intrigue players to buy these DLC bundles is the release date. For example, this new physical Fortnite release for the Transformers skins came out a week before the bundle was available digitally. This gave diehard Transformers and skin collectors a reason to get this copy. Other than that, it's useless. Generally, I don't think this would work for most games, but because Fortnite is such a popular game, it works. It gets more Fortnite content on the shelves and is perfect for the holiday seasons. And if you buy one, you gotta get them all. And what about this scenario? Have you ever walked into a store and seen a copy of a game on a shelf and think, hey wait, didn't that game get shut down a while ago? An online game will have its server shut down, but physical copies still get sold for a while. Sometimes there might just be a delay in yanking these copies off the shelf, but sometimes you might just go into a discount store and still be able to find new copies of Battleborn for PS4 being sold even though the servers have been down for a long time, making it completely useless. Or for a few more examples, it was announced that Friday the 13th game will be shutting down. You can still buy a physical copy until December 31st, 2023, and you can play the game until December 31st, 2024 when the servers will be shut down. So yeah, you still can play it, but only for a year. Is it really worth buying a game if you know the death sentence is looming? Seems useless to me. Those are some useless physical games. Let me know if you have any useless physical games in your collection. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. I hope to see you in the next one. See you later.